So I will say welcome to our wonderful panelists. Thank you all so much for being here. We're excited to have you. And welcome to the attendees. I'm sure more of you will be coming in shortly, but for those of you who are here already, welcome. Thanks for being here. And you can see on your screen, I have the title card up there letting you know that this is our 8th week of the Real Life Librarianship series. And today we are featuring non-traditional library jobs, which I'm really excited about. It's been going to be a little bit different than what we've been doing so far. And this is our last session in 2020. We will be picking back up in 2021, as you can see on the title card. And as always, the link to the evaluation is there, but I will send that out to you all tomorrow. Please, if you have questions, know that this is for you. We want you to speak up. So go ahead and hit the chat or the Q&A feature and ask any questions that you have. Our panelists will be delighted to answer your questions. But just in case, we've got some prepared and we will begin with those now. So I'm going to say to our panelists, the first question, and it is, please introduce yourself. Tell us what is your current job title, where do you work, where did you go to school, and then give us kind of a broad overview of the path that you took to get to where you are today. Okay? And Margie, I'm going to let you go first.
Hi, I'm Margie Grilly, and I'm excited to be here. I think this is such a cool concept. So welcome to everybody who's listening in. I'm an independent information person. I have been running my own business for about 11 years. So I guess my job title would be, I call it secondary research and information services consulting. And so I'm self-employed and really enjoy doing that. I've got my MLIS from the University of Wisconsin in Madison. While I was in grad school, I started exploring different types of library jobs. And I had always had a real interest in like medical information, medical news, healthcare, that sort of thing. And so I started following the path of medical librarianship. And so I did all my independent work, all my project work was focused on that. And along the way, I also discovered the concept of being an independent entrepreneur, and I thought that sounded pretty cool. So I kind of tucked that away in my back pocket for another day. But my first job out of library school, I went to work for a hospital and healthcare system in the Twin Cities. It included Mercy and Unity hospitals in the North Metro, and then Abbott, Northwestern, and United hospitals in the core cities. And so I rotated among those 4 libraries on a weekly basis. So I just kind of dove right into doing medical research and providing information that way. A lot of articles and digging in journals and that sort of thing. So after that, I went to work for a really small, like a 7-person environmental health consulting firm in Minneapolis. Very, very niche organization. They tracked the research and legislation and litigation into the potential health effects of electromagnetic fields, and the electric utility industry was our clients. So that was very unique, very fun. Like I said, very niche. So I was there for 5 or 6 years, and at about that time, I had a couple little kids and decided I was going to take a little bit of break from that. And after a small break, I took a brief stint at the Minnesota Department of Transportation, long enough to realize that was not what I was interested in. So I kind of jumped back out, but I did get, I got recruited to work at what used to be called Guidant Corporation, and now it's Boston Scientific. And so I got to go back into the medical library field. And I was there for about 6 years. When Boston Scientific bought Guidant, they did some downsizing, and unfortunately I was one of those. So that just gave me the the launch moment to start my own business. And I've been doing that, like I said, for about 11 years now. So that's my path, I guess.
Excellent. And Margie, right away in the chat, Jim Byerly said hello. It seemed like he knew you. So
Sorry, Jim. I enjoyed working with Jim and the other librarians. Nothing bad to say about MnDOT Library.
thank you so much. And Carolyn.
Hi, I'm happy to be a part of this program. I have to fully admit that I've never had the librarian title professionally. So currently I work at JLL, Jones Lang LaSalle, and my title, I have two titles actually. I'm research director, but in commercial real estate, it's like banking where you have an officer title. So you're a vice president or an executive vice president. So I'm vice president, but really I'm research director for like the Minnesota geography, basically, of commercial real estate that Jones Lang LaSalle covers. I ended up in this current position via economic development. So I got my master's in MLIS at UW Milwaukee. And I had internships in libraries. I had some teaching experience. And I graduated with my master's degree in 2011 when there really weren't too many jobs available. And via networking and just trying to translate what I learned in library school to the needs of a lot of businesses, which were, database development and information research. And fortunately, I was able to land a spot in doing research for Greater MSP, which is our regional economic development partnership for the Twin Cities. It was great timing because I was a recent graduate and Greater MSP had just formed. Like they had gotten their 501c3 accreditation within like 2 weeks of me starting there. So I got to be one of the very first employees at this kind of startup nonprofit. So it was a great spot for me to learn and to grow. I was also new to the Twin Cities. I'm originally from the Milwaukee area, and I had just done some grad program work in Austria. So I had moved to Minneapolis kind of sight unseen. I'd only visited here, and I moved to Minneapolis with an ex-partner. But I had a crash course in the Twin Cities economy by working at Greater MSP. And I was there for 5 years. And after a certain amount of time, I decided I wanted to pursue private sector options. And so again, via networking and just, reaching out to anybody that had an interesting job, inviting them for coffee or buying beers. I connected with the man that had my job at JLL. When he decided to leave, he called me and said, I'm taking a different position. Do you want my job? And I said, yes. And so now I get to research the Twin Cities and the Twin Cities economy, the Minnesota economy, but it's on the private sector side. And so in commercial real estate, we kind of have two pillars of what we focus on. One pillar is occupiers or companies, employers. So for instance, United Health Group is one of our big clients. We do all their real estate stuff. So like every office, every database, or every data center, every warehouse, there's a lot of real estate for big corporations, and they usually contract that out to third parties. So we help with the occupier side. And then the other side is the investor side. And so that's where it's very Wall Street driven. It's institutional investment. And so if when you look at the downtown skyline, most of those buildings are owned by banks, by REITs, by hedge funds, by pension funds, by foreign corporations. And so we, and myself included, help to market those assets for investment. So we call that capital markets. So I do all the research and information to support these transactions, whether it's the occupiers or the investors. Yes. All right. I'll stop there.
No, that's great. Honestly, that sounds very much like a library job to me. You might not call it that, but it does sound like that. Thank you so much. And Mary.
Hello, everybody. I'm Mary Kunish. I am a I have been a school library media specialist for the last 20 years. I started at an elementary school in North Minneapolis and then went into the Robbinsdale district, and just actually on Monday, I officially retired after 25 years from teaching.
Congratulations.
And thank you. So I have been a school library media specialist for the last 20 some years. Started in the classroom at the school that I was at, and I was one of those late bloomer educators. I didn't get my teaching license until I was 35 years old, and went into the classroom. And at the school that I was teaching at, of course, we had to go to the library. And it was just around the time that they started creating, really hands-on computer labs for students. And it's when they had the Apple computers that were kind of dome-shaped, nose-shaped on the one side and different colors. And it was just very exciting. And so I had to take my students down to the lab and to the library for that. And I thought, I would love this kind of a job. I've always wanted to be a librarian, but being a teacher with young kids, or in my mid-30s with young kids, teaching was a good way to go about it with the same schedule. And when the two LMS retired from that school, I was given the opportunity to move into that position, even though I didn't have my licensure, because I'd graduated from the College of St. Catherine's with my teaching degree, but then I started my master's degree in information media at St. Cloud State. And along with that came the licensure for a library media specialist. So because I was in the program, I got a waiver to start the position. So I did a lot of, learning as I went, as I worked through my master's degree, and just absolutely have loved the position as a library media specialist. There is nothing more fun than teaching kids how to use computer skills and seeing their little, the light bulbs go off. And also, I would probably say, the technology that I know, probably 65% of it or more, I have learned from my students. So it was certainly a very mutual way. And it was really great because I would always try to combine the library literature and organization with technology skills. So, if a teacher was, if in art they were learning techniques from a specific artist, I would try to make sure that we were doing lessons around that artist, the biography of that artist, where they lived and what period of the, time was it, and what was going on in the world, and what were the techniques, and what were the materials that they used. And so it was really a great way to really try to give them a full rounded education with things that were going on in the classroom. And, that led to a lot of other things. But one of the other things that I've been doing for the last 4 years, I was elected to the House of Representatives in 2016. So I represent the District 41B, and that's Columbia Heights and Hilltop, St. Anthony Village, and New Brighton. And then just this past November, about a month ago, I was elected to the Senate. So I will represent the full district of District 41. And so I add Fridley and a little bit of Spring Lake Park to that position. And I can just say that the job of a library media specialist has certainly morphed over the 25 years I've been at it, but it certainly was a rewarding position.
Thank you so much. You all have such interesting backgrounds. I really love that first question, finding out how everyone got to be here. It's just so exciting to me. So let us talk now about what people would consider a traditional set of library skills. And I know you've all been to library school, so you know this. So how do you utilize these skills in your current role? And do you think it's possible to do your current job without being a librarian? And why or why not? And I'm going to let Carolyn go first.
Okay, that's a really good question. I'll answer the last question first. No, you do not have to be a librarian to have my job. And actually, there's somebody like myself in every major market in the US, and then we also have like a whole international team of researchers. So out of about 100 researchers in the US, I only know of one other librarian within my company, or somebody who has an MLIS background. And so a lot of us, or a lot of the other people, have backgrounds in urban planning, or they have MBAs, finance degrees. It's very heavy on business as like the educational curriculum. But I do think my librarian skill set is a huge advantage. I think the biggest way that it benefits me is, so my stakeholders are brokers. So I work directly with some clients, but most of my day-to-day interaction is with my internal clients, which are our brokers, commercial real estate brokers, the people that buy, sell, lease real estate. And to maybe provide a little more perspective, it's really anything that's commercial. So anything that's not single family houses. So it could be office, retail, industrial, multifamily, apartment complexes, it could be senior housing, it could be college campuses. So like basically anything, any space. And brokers are the ones that they're the salespeople. And in our company, they're 100% commission. So it's a highly competitive world, very type A personalities I'm working with. And they also are incredibly smart people. Like they have their own MBAs from, fancy institutions. But oftentimes the requests that we get for information or research aren't the right questions. And I always go back to what I learned about the reference interview in library school, where somebody can ask for a blue book, but that's not really what they're asking for. Like you have to kind of get at like what is the real problem you're trying to solve for, and then what are the other resources that can maybe help to answer that question. And maybe there are better questions that we can be answering to suit your needs or your client's needs. So I think that is the biggest like moment where I feel like a librarian in my current position.
Excellent. Thank you, Carolyn.
Yeah.
Mary. Mary, you're muted.
So will you just repeat that for me, please?
Absolutely. So talk to me a little bit about traditional library skills and how they're utilized in your current position. And do you think it's possible to do your current job without being a librarian, and tell us why?
Well, I think it really takes a unique person to be a librarian, because back in the day, we would go to the library, it would be very quiet and hush hush, and librarians were putting books on shelves and checking books out and perhaps guiding you a little bit as to your selection. But a school librarian position is very different, because we're dealing with both the physical and digital information. We're responsible for textbooks, the actual textbooks, and then we're also responsible for the online textbooks. We're responsible for keeping our collection up to date with the latest research material, both physically, but then we also need to know about which databases are the most current and are unique to the schools that we're in. And so there's a lot of knowledge that you have to stay up on, and you have to be curious enough to look out for those things and search for them. And every year we are constantly updating those information, whether it's on our website or in a collaborative role with our teachers and with our admin. And so basically we're curators of information, and because we now have the internet, information is always changing. It's changing overnight. Facts and information. You think about those encyclopedias that we used to have, and we used to use them for years because they were so expensive. Well, now we can get the population of a country, overnight, or, at a click of a mouse. And so curating that information, whether it's a physical copy of a piece of material or whether it's digital, is never going to go away. So you always have to be on point when it comes to that sort of thing. And if you're not, just as we were speaking, research, we continue to do the research for our schools and our grade levels, but we also are teaching students how to be discerning when it comes to that information, and to build their critical skills to realize what is real information and what is not information. And then it's also building those kids into independent learners. So we're really modeling in our position in a school how to gather information, how to use information, how to communicate information. Are you going to write a report, or are you going to put it into a slideshow? Are you going to do a little movie? Are you going to use TikTok? I mean, what is the way that you are going to share the information that you use? And it's the same for us. Like, kids are so used to quick bits of information and learning modes. We have to also, adapt to those, especially now with COVID. You look at how teachers literally overnight had to take their classroom from a physical classroom with desks and chairs and books and that sort of thing into a virtual classroom. And that's the sort of thing that we do also with helping the teachers. So we're not only working with our students, but we're working with the teachers to help support them. If they don't know what they're doing, they will come to us and say, how do you do this? Or what's the software? Or is there a program to do that? And of course, the administration relies on us to be up to date on that information so that they can either pay for it or allow it either for the students or the administration. And, we're also kind of like counselors and social workers. We see the kids in our schools when it's open. We get to know every single kid in our school. And you see them matriculate from grade level to grade level, especially at the elementary school. You see them go from kindergarten all the way through 5th grade. And, you build those relationships. And so relationships are really a key part of educating our students. So when you say, can anybody do this? I would say no. And I've seen people who either are licensed or are in the process of getting a license, or don't have a license, and a school has put them in that position, and they were ill prepared for the vast variety of responsibilities. And when we go through our programs, we build cohorts, we build people that we can work with, and ask questions with, and even in our districts we do. And so it takes a very unique person that's collaborative, that can multitask, that has patience, that is willing to continue learning. And does that need a license? No, but it sure helps, because when you get that licensure, we are prepared for all of those things ahead of time. And so that is my very short, long answer.
That was wonderful. Can you speak just briefly about how you took all of those skills, those wonderful list of skills, and use them in your current position with the state legislature?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing, because I approach it just like I would any kind of a lesson or a learning experience. When I have a piece of legislation that I either want to carry myself or somebody brings to me, I automatically almost fit it into the grid of a lesson plan. And so what is my objective? What is my objective? What resources do I have available? What resources do I need? Who can help me? Who are going to be my collaborators on this? So if you think of a teacher coming in, the history teacher coming in and say, we want to learn about this, or we want to create this project, that's what I kind of mentally do. And then what resources do I need to understand it better? And then how am I going to present it? So what is this legislation actually going to say? And at the end of all of this, how am I going to present it to my fellow legislators so I can convince them to support and vote for my bill? And then, at the end, you think of assessment or the final product. How is this going to affect my constituents or the people in Minnesota? And so for me, it really has helped me keep organized. And I get a legislative assistant. And the last one that I had, I literally gave him that outline of a lesson plan and said, here's what we need to do. And we need to fill in all these blanks. And it just worked so super well. And I've had legislators say, I feel like you just gave me a lesson on, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, well, pretty much I did. And so it helps me keep very well organized. And I think the fact that I'm willing to ask questions a lot, there's just too many ducks on our pond, and we need to allow hunting on our pond. And it's such a crazy notion, but then you have to look at those facts and what are the environmental impacts and
Carolyn, can you hear me?
I can, yeah. Did I drop off or did others drop off?
Oops, I'm sorry. I've been losing internet on and off all day. I don't know how much of that you got, but being a school library media specialist has been invaluable.
Thank you so much, Mary. Okay, and we appear to be experiencing some technical difficulties. I'm not sure exactly what happened, but I know we lost a couple panelists and my screen was frozen, and I see from Lynn that it was frozen for a minute. So we'll keep plugging away. Hopefully that works. I'm sorry if you missed some of it, but we'll keep moving. And Margie, can you hear me okay?
I can. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I have you go ahead? Do you want me to repeat you the question?
Nope, that's okay.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, I was thinking about traditional library skills, and I feel like I went to college so long ago, and some of those traditional library skills that were taught in college, you know, I don't know that they're even taught anymore. But I think about what what Carolyn said about the reference interview, and the value of that is probably tops on my list in terms of a skill that I need. I talk to, so many different people who need such varied information, and it really is an important skill to have, to be able to get at what they're trying to tell you. I find especially with my clients, they tend to be more engineers, technical researchers, physicians. So, they have, their head is in a different space than maybe some places, but, so being able to keep asking questions to get at what they're trying to say. And along with that is the just understanding the industry. So all of my clients are medical device companies, and so I do a deep dive into whatever they're looking at, whatever they're working on. I follow the news and regulatory information on what's going on in the industry. We're lucky that we live here in Minnesota with Medical Alley and the big, I call them the big three: Medtronic, Boston Scientific, and what used to be St. Jude is now Abbott. But and then just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of smaller device companies. So it's easy to get information just to follow peripherally on what's going on, but just having a good knowledge of what the industry is that you're working in is very important. I don't know how to answer the question about being able to do my job without being a librarian. I tend to think not. I know I've known of some agencies that have tried to hire, more researchers than a librarian for the library, and it's not a fit. I really feel like, you need to be a librarian to do a librarian's job. I can't, I don't think otherwise it would fit. I know I worked for a while, a woman who had been in the analyst industry. Again, I don't think she got what we were doing. A lot of crosstalk, a lot of information that just wasn't getting communicated correctly. So I feel like librarians, they know each other's language. So, yeah.
Great. I don't think you'll find anyone disagreeing with
Yeah.
Librarians should be doing librarian jobs.
Right.
I think that's a pretty popular opinion. Okay, so I'd like to talk a little bit about paths that we take. So I first want to know what put you on the path that you are each on right now. You all went to library school. You had a whole host of library jobs you could have gone toward, but you all went in a particular direction, and I'm wondering why. And then thinking about that, do you see your current role as something that would work well for someone else that might be transitioning, either from another field or another branch of a librarianship? If they're trying to look for a new job, is this someplace they could go? And tell us your thoughts on that. And Mary, I'm going to start with you.
I would say that my path was directed at a very young age. I loved to read as a kid. I grew up in a small rural school, it was actually a village. So a small rural village town growing up, and we didn't have a library or anything like that. But the bookmobile would come in the summer, and I can just tell you it was the most exciting thing in the world every week when that bookmobile would, hit our little local store, and we would get to go down there and pick out a book or two. My parents both read a lot. My brothers and sisters read a lot. So I just loved being in a library. And I also always knew that I wanted to be a teacher, but I didn't realize that that was a thing, because the schools that I went to, they had somebody's mom came in and did the library once a week at the school, or I never really paid attention at high school, just what kind of a need there was to become a librarian. And so, as I said, I didn't get my teaching degree until I was 35, and I'd held a bunch of other jobs, but I think I always knew I wanted to go back and be a teacher. And so the fact that when I became a classroom teacher, I got to see what the library was like and get to know the librarians and the library media specialists. And then I began to realize more what it was going to take to become a librarian, and that I'd need to go back to school. In most school districts, you have to have a licensure to be a library media specialist, even though there are very many that are trying to kind of pass that up so that they don't have to be licensed. But I think, seeing that combination of technology and library just kind of clicked with me and really made me realize that that's what I was going to do. And so through weekend colleges and taking classes in the summertime, I was able to get that licensure and, stay in the position that I have. And I think there was a second part to that. What was
transitioning? So you yourself transitioned then to the state legislature.
Yeah.
Is that a natural fit, do you think?
I think it was, because as a teacher and getting to know all these families and all these kids, you see really what families have to do to struggle to keep a house over a roof over their heads and feed their kids. Parents who have to work 2 or 3 jobs. New American immigrants who are struggling and trying their very best to get their kids to school and educated while they themselves are learning a new culture and language and way of life. And so, being sort of that boots on the ground person, I realized that there were things that as a state we could do better to ensure that there are resources there for all of our families and all of our communities. But I also realized that there are a lot of expectations put on our schools, and again, those that are boots on the ground, the teachers, to ensure that our students are well educated. And one of those areas, of course, is assessment. So there was a time I was the assessment coordinator as well as the library media specialist at the elementary school. So I had to organize and facilitate and schedule and collect the data on all the testing that we gave the kids. And it was just test. And it was back when there had to be terrible cuts to education. So out went the art teacher, out went music, and it was teach to the test, really mostly just reading and math and a little bit of science. I mean, there was a principal that said, we're not doing social studies this year. We just need to do reading and math. And literally that's all we did was math, reading, test. And I just couldn't stand it for the kids, and the teachers were not enjoying their job at all. And so I was seeing a lot of ways that maybe I could make a difference for our students when it comes to education, as well as ensuring that we are financing, that we're supporting our schools the very best way, and not, bogging them down with these unfunded mandates to do this and to do that, but then never having the dollars follow in order to do that. And of course, that just makes it even harder to provide, a well-rounded education that includes, kind of a liberal arts education. It just got to the point where it wasn't really that much fun anymore for students or teachers. And so I guess at the end of the day, I'd like to make a difference in that way.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mary.
Yeah.
Margie. Oh, wait, Margie, before you begin, I just want to say, Mary, you got a comment that said, thank you so much for advocating for teachers, students, and families. Margie.
Okay, so talking about a path, huh? I suppose that, so I grew up surrounded with libraries. My mom was a librarian. My aunt was a librarian. My sister worked in a library. My dad sat on our city library board. Mary, you'll appreciate, I grew up in Columbia Heights, which is one of your areas. So, but so yeah, books, reading, libraries, I was surrounded. So I feel like it was kind of in my blood. Once I got my undergraduate degree in sociology and was just thinking about what next, it was just, well, I'm going to go get my library degree. So, but I always kind of knew that I wasn't interested in a public library or a school library or anything like that. I really was interested in more like the specialized environment. And I always had an interest and fascination with medicine. I am way too squeamish to be a practitioner, but I've always been fascinated with reading about it. I always get a kick out of looking at the pictures. I can do that. Pictures in the books and the journals without getting, but seeing scars and blood doesn't work for me. And I always joke because whenever my kids, when they were little and would get a sliver, I always had to have somebody else take it out. I couldn't even do that much. But no, I got a real interest in the medical field. So I just kept building on that. I started out working in the hospital libraries and just kind of kept my focus on building that understanding and that knowledge in that field. I have a good deep understanding of like the publishing industry for medical journals, key physicians in certain industries, especially the device competitors. I just kind of absorb all that. And so it's just been one of my interests. I just keep following it and building on it and trying to gain more knowledge as I go along. I think the medical device community in the Twin Cities is a pretty tight community. There's a lot of overlap, not overlap, but you'll find that a lot of employees who worked at one of the big three will then break off and start their own little company. And then maybe that company gets successful when they've launched a product and one of the big three will buy them. And so you get a lot of movement within that industry. And so like I said, it's a pretty small community. So what was the second part is
if someone was thinking of transitioning into, is this a natural transition, do you think, to go from working in a public library to working as a consultant? Why or why not?
It could certainly be. I mean, you really would have to have that interest, I think. I know that it helps to have started out somewhere else. One of my colleagues at Boston Scientific worked in the advertising industry as a librarian. And then she broke off on her own. And so a lot of her clients were still in that advertising industry. She did make the transition over to Boston Scientific, but she comes in it with a head for more of the business side of the information as opposed to the medical information. So I think it's where you kind of start out. Obviously I could never have done this right out of the starting gate as a fresh grad. But after 20 plus years, you can eventually, but you really have to have that desire. Most people prefer a regular paycheck. So, that's not something I get. So.
Good, thank you. That's very helpful to know, I think, for people. Carolyn.
Hi. So I was, as Margie and Mary were discussing their paths, sort of in a similar aspect. So my path, the consistent theme is more about intellectual curiosity. I guess that's like what's pulled me through different jobs. The fact that I worked in economic development and now commercial real estate, those are both very serendipitous and, to be honest, kind of accidental. That trigger was, graduating in 2011 and saying yes to the best opportunity that came my way when there were very few jobs around. And I feel fortunate that I got to, explore these industries, because for a lot of people, it is very intentional. Like I want to do economic research, or I want to be a commercial real estate broker. But my thread is that the intellectual curiosity that I think is true of all librarians. So it's really just, if there's a question, continuing to seek the answers until you feel satisfied. And if you don't feel satisfied, continue to keep searching and learning more. We also, I think librarians in general tend to have a bend towards technology. And for myself, I started at a young age where I taught myself HTML because I wanted to have a cool MySpace. And then as a professional, I taught myself GIS because I wanted geographic information systems, because I wanted to create beautiful interactive maps. It made my job easier. Also, it looked cool and was interesting and engaging. So I think those skills are beneficial regardless of the industry that you're in, but just sort of that mentality, like if there's something that can make my job easier, how do I learn it? How do I teach myself that skill? And then how do I become really good at it? And then share that with other people. And just having passion for, look at this thing that I made. It's making everybody's lives easier because all the information's here. That's, again, like a very librarian specific trait that I think most of us have. Sorry, I wrote some notes down. It's funny too, I think it was Margie mentioned there's a difference between analysts and librarians. I started out as an analyst. I was an analyst not too long ago. There is a difference, but I think it's also a good building block. That way of thinking of it's almost like the art of Excel. Being able to like reconcile numbers and to use the technology. I mean, Excel is a tool to help solve answers. So that's a very analyst specific skill set. I think where we take it beyond just analysis as a librarian is when you answer the question, now what? So what does this mean? Like, what does this data tell us? What do we do with it? And I think that's the researcher, information professional that a lot of us are. And to answer the last question, is this a place where one could go? Yes, I think commercial real estate tends to kind of try to keep people out. That's something I try to break down a lot. We use a lot of jargon. We use a lot of Wall Street terminology that we don't need to use. it's a very insular community. It's often, fathers and sons. I really believe that if anybody has the passion and the interest, it absolutely is a place to succeed and do well as an information professional. I think where I stand out from a lot of my colleagues is because I just really am interested in cities and how they are developed and what a city could look like. And that's very different than the transactional approach where it's like, all right, I'll sell this building and make this amount of money and then we're done. Whereas I really feel excited and energized when I get to be working with clients and we have the question, so we have this site in the North Loop. What do we do with it? Is it going to be office or a hotel or multifamily? Do we make a park out of it? Who knows? But those are really interesting, engaging conversations to be a part of. And you need more than just numbers people and financial people making those decisions. You also need people like us, librarians, to kind of provide different perspectives and to, give examples of, like what is successful elsewhere? What does the research tell us? What could we envision? And then also, how do we provide rationale to back up what we want to do with a site or land? So I believe if anybody's interested in commercial real estate or economic development, we as librarians are well poised to do well.
That's terrific. Thank you. And I appreciated your reference to MySpace. That was very awesome. Made me chuckle. So, okay.
So can I say something?
Yeah, please say something.
I think this ties in with our last panel where one of the panelists really gave a great summary of how librarians make connections. And all three of these panelists said basically the same thing. Carolyn really did a nice job talking about how it's more than data, it's more than information, it's how they all fit together. And I do think that's one of the characteristics of a really great librarian, because we know where the information is, we've read the news, we've done the research, and those connections really are what make our work support other people's, I think. So it's nice to hear these themes come through over these 8 weeks of panels.
I definitely agree with that. It is nice to catch those threads that run through everyone's answers. Okay. I want to talk about now, what is your day like? What are you all doing with your time?
Olivia, we haven't been able to hear you.
How about now? Can you guys hear me now?
Now we can, yeah.
Okay.
I heard the first part of the question, and then I think you probably assigned it to somebody.
I did. I actually called on Margie, but so the question is, tell me about your day. We want to know what it is, what it means to do your job on a daily basis. That's the base. That's what I'm looking for.
So you said me, right? My day is so atypical, I guess it never knows I never know from one day to the next. But I don't know if I mentioned this, but about 5 years ago, Boston Scientific, where I had used to work full time, had asked if I would consult for them or be one of their contractors. So I like to say that Boston Scientific is kind of my bread and butter. I work about 20 hours a week for them as a consultant. And so a typical day for me will be, whatever projects I have on my plate for them. usually have, a handful at any one time. And so then any other work that comes in from my other clients just is more usually on an as needed basis. So I may not hear from them for a week or two, and then they'll pop up with a question or some research needs. And so, yeah, my day is just spent sitting at my my computer. And when I'm working for Boston Scientific, I have access to their network and their resources. And so I, log in as though I'm almost as an employee, and have access to the databases that I need to do my work. When I'm working for some of my other clients, then it's on my personal computer. And I often use the resources of other libraries around the metro area, specifically the University of Minnesota has, you have to physically be there if you're not a student, staff, or faculty. So I will often make a trip down to the U. I haven't been able to since COVID, because they've closed the libraries on campus to outsiders, which would be me. So I am able to do most of my work from home though. That's kind of it. Just I spend a lot of time staring at my computer and doing deep dives for information for my clients. So
would you talk about some of these resources that you're looking at, that you're using?
yes. Because everything I do tends to be more medically related, there's a publicly available database that's published by the National Library of Medicine. It's called Medline, and you can access it through a service called PubMed, and it's free to anyone. It's your tax dollars at work. So I use PubMed heavily. There's a database called Embase. It's published by Elsevier. That is a fee-based, so I do use that heavily for Boston Scientific. I get a lot of help from Google Scholar. I'm not afraid to do a deep dive into the internet if needed. And I also have often used physical resources. When I do go to the University of Minnesota, sometimes I'll find myself in some obscure library. The U of M has hundreds of libraries besides the biggies. So, if I need to dig into some obscure veterinary textbook for a photograph for somebody of a sheep jugular vein or something, so then you really do need to venture beyond the confines. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And then before I let you go, someone has asked in the chat, can you describe what is you're doing when you're doing a deep dive?
Well, gosh, it depends on the question and the research that I'm doing. I've been asked, I like to tell people that when they ask me what I do, I say whatever they ask me to do. And so when I'm working for Boston Scientific, I am often working for supporting the regulatory divisions and departments. So for example, in order to bring a product to market, a literature search has to be done to show that if something's been written about this device, or if something's been written about its competitors, or something similar has been, or if something's been written on a similar product. You need to have that background for the regulatory pieces. If they're doing a preclinical study, before you would take a product and test it in humans, you test it in animals. But before you can test something in an animal, you have to show that that has never been done before. You do not want to do any type of testing on an animal if it's redundant. So has to show that it's never been done, it's unique. We're not putting this animal through any stress or duress. So these are literature searches that you really have to scour and make sure you've grabbed or you've found all published literature that meets that need. And that's why when I talked earlier about understanding the industry, that's really important in keeping up with understanding what's going on in that, just having a deep understanding of your topic is really important. So I don't know if I answered the question enough or if that helped or not.
I'm sure Lynn will let us know if she has a follow-up, but
Okay.
I thought it was great.
Okay.
Thank you so much. And Carolyn.
Kind of like Margie, my day varies depending on what the research request is, or whom I'm working with, how quickly they need it. So I mentioned earlier, like I work with brokers who do pretty much anything related to our built environment, and so the requests can be either financial in scope or they can be very broad, and kind of goes back to my economic development days where it's just talking about like why Minnesota or why the Twin Cities or why Northeast Minneapolis, like why are these places like good for investment or good for a business to set up shop. I enjoy the fact that I get to make a lot of my deliverables. I think in a lot of other industries and a lot of other companies, the data analyst is kind of separate than the person that is doing the storytelling. But I get my own data. I do primary research. Every quarter I have reports on who's moving in and out of the market, who's trading in the market. So I have primary data, and then I get to analyze it, and then I get to visualize it, and then I get to think about what is the best deliverable for this message or story that I need to give to the client. And so that may be, I do a lot of decks, PowerPoint presentations. It's very, in a lot of ways, we work kind of like a McKinsey or a consulting firm. It's a lot of decks. I also do a lot with online interactive visualizations. So I mentioned GIS or Geographic Information Systems. We have a lot of interactive web-hosted maps via Esri is a tool that's pretty ubiquitous. We also have proprietary technology tools. JLL has something called Blackbird, and it's like Google Earth, but like on steroids. And I enjoy it because I loved SimCity when I was a kid, and basically I get to and also enjoyed The Sims. And so we get to like build like renderings of buildings like in this 3D world. And so it's like this 3-dimensional tour of, you can go micro, you can start in the building and then see the block, and then you can zoom out and see demographics mapped out in a geography across the metro or the state even. So stuff like that gets me really excited. That's part of my daily work as well. I do think it's worth mentioning that my day-to-day has kind of changed dramatically since March, since COVID happened. Prior to March, I traveled a lot to very glamorous Midwest cities like Columbus. I went to Chicago a lot. That's where our headquarters are. But I remember like my last business trip was early March, and it was very clear that there was stuff happening because I remember I was at O'Hare, and the flight that I took from Chicago to MSP, usually they're totally booked. It was like a 10th full, and that was like the first or second week of March. I'm like, wait a minute, something's happening. So all of my work travel has totally stopped. commercial real estate is a very extroverted space. Brokers are always hustling. They are traveling all over the world. That's stopped. A lot of international investment has stopped. If you're going to buy, for instance, the IDS tower and you're in China, you can't get to the US and like see this tower that you're buying. So things have really changed a lot since March. I feel fortunate that my job is still, I can still do it really well from my apartment, as opposed to the brokers where like their jobs were just to network and to connect and to, you know, every evening, if you wanted to, you could go to a happy hour or a dinner, is entertaining clients. So that's changed for them dramatically, but now for the first time in years, I'm actually able to focus on the research and the stuff that I really like. That's what pulled me into this career, and it's kind of fun to get back to those roots.
Fantastic. So do you work alone, Carolyn, or do you have a team of people that are fielding these research questions with you?
So I used to have a team. So prior to March, I managed the Midwest research team, and then I was going to transition to a new job. And so in that transition that has been halted because of COVID, my team is now somebody else's responsibility. So it's actually kind of nice. So I don't have to like manage right now. I get to be a part of a team. So I'm part of the Midwest research team. I'm part of the US research team. I have these colleagues that I talk to on a regular basis in our research network. And then in our Minneapolis office, we probably have about 30 brokers. And so those are my colleagues too. So I feel lucky that I have my Minneapolis people, and then I have the researchers that are nationwide. And then there's one other man that helps support Minneapolis research. But yeah, we're all a little scrappy, I will say. It's not the biggest team. It could be bigger, I think.
What kind of volume are you talking about with the questions? You said you're answering questions a lot from the brokers, or your primary source. How many questions are you answering, both pre and post pandemic?
That's a good question, and kind of hard to quantify. I guess, I mean, not too long ago, I just like did a quick like sum of how many emails I send in a day. I mean, I send like 60 emails a day. I probably have 3 or 4 conference calls a day, and then I get other random calls from coworkers. So it's more quantity over quality oftentimes. If like my quarterly reports, I put a lot of effort into. Like we have like this huge market overview deck that's like 100 slides. I put work into some very big deliverables, but a lot of what I do is just like quick, like sending out info. We see that we're a mile wide, inch deep. So I am not. I'm not writing the book on commercial real estate, but I am quick with replies. I try to be.
And we got a question in the chat. How big is Jones Lang LaSalle? How many people are in the company?
That's a
Minneapolis. I mean,
yeah, that's a good question. We are a multi-billion-dollar company. I think we're in the top 200 on the Fortune 500. There's in the commercial real estate world, CBRE is the #1 in the world, where Jones Lang LaSalle is #2 in the world, to give some perspective. And then our Minneapolis office, I think we're like 50 million in revenue. And that's just our little tiny scrappy office. So it's interesting to be part of. It feels like we're in a startup sometimes, because everybody is just like doing a bazillion jobs, and we're in a lot of different hats. But we are like embedded in this huge like corporate behemoth. So there's a lot of differing cultures that I have to navigate.
wow. Obviously, I find it fascinating. Most of those questions were mine just because I really know almost nothing about what you do. And also bonus points for using behemoth naturally in a sentence. That was really impressive.
Thanks.
And let's go to Mary. So just to remind you, because I've kind of gone off track here, I want to know what a typical day is like for you, Mary. And if you wouldn't mind focusing a little on the legislature, just because I feel like we have a good grasp on what a school media specialist does. What do you do now that you're in the legislature?
Well, it's so interesting because one day I'm at school as a library media specialist, and the next day I'm sitting on the floor of the House of Representatives doing this, that, and the other. And so I can tell you that the legislature has changed since COVID started because it's very it's very personal. I have lobbyists coming to see me. I mean, my day is just packed with committee meetings. And when I'm not in committee meetings, I have appointments with lobbyists or constituents or people who have a problem and want me to help fix it. And then kind of like what Carolyn said, every night I could be going to happy hours or events that are hosted for legislators by businesses and organizations that want our attention. But that all came to a screeching halt, just like everything else with COVID. And pretty much like our schools, we had to figure out how to do our work virtually overnight. And so typically we would be on the floor in the chamber of the House of Representatives at least twice a week, where we would be bringing up bills that we would like to get passed. We'll be voting on it. We'll be debating them. And we aren't able to do that anymore. We can't be with each other. And so we've had to do everything virtually. All the committee meetings where we would go down into the committee rooms and sit around our U-shaped area with the Republicans on one side and the Dems on the other side, and the chair and the staff at the top. And we'd have people come in and testify and tell us why this is a good bill, why this isn't a good bill. We now have to do all of that by Zoom. And so we're all home, or some people go into their office and close the door and are there for just to get out of the house and do something different. And then also the voting part, it used to be that you had to be in the House, in the Capitol building, on the floor. When you vote, you have to push your button, a green button for yes, a red button for no, and you could never have anybody else do that for you. And so we had to figure out a system of being able to vote virtually by voice. And so it goes on forever and ever because they have to do a roll call for each of us. And we have to say, Mary Kunish, New Brighton, I vote no. And so it's changed considerably. Unbelievable amounts of email. Just unbelievable. I mean, I can't keep up on it. Just things have really slowed down as far as trying to do legislation, because if I was working on a bill, I would be working with my LA, I would be working with House Research. People would come and talk to me about it. I would talk to them about it. And it just hasn't been that easy. And you have to remember, we are not a full-time legislature, even though it feels like that, especially now with COVID. And because of COVID, because of the civil unrest this summer, we have been having to go back every month, every 30 days, we have to go back and give the governor those executive powers during this time so that he can make split-second decisions and to open up all these funding revenues, where before we didn't have to, we would be done in May, at the end of May, and then not meet again until either January or February. But now it seems like we are always working at this. Like this morning, I was on a Zoom call with the governor at 8 o'clock, but at 7:30, we all got on to talk about that before. So 7:30, we have a pre-meeting, we have the meeting with the governor, then we have a post-meeting. And then, this is this is like my fifth Zoom meeting today, and I still have one to join after this. And that has really changed. But to go back to the teaching part of it, you know, as I said, Monday, as of 3:15, I was retired from that job. But in August, I would spend 10 hours at school physically. We had to figure out how to get our old Chromebooks back and get new Chromebooks to them in a very safe way. And we did that. We switched out 900 Chromebooks. And then we had to help those kids, you know, do you remember your username? Do you remember, you don't know your you don't know your password anymore. And so I was on the phone from 7 o'clock in the morning till 4 o'clock in the evening with kids and parents. And I would be on the phone, I'd put it down, my red light would be on, and there's 8 more messages. And so it was a lot of verbal instruction over the phone, like literally open it up. No, don't click the power button because it's automatically going to come on, because they would say it won't power up, because they'd open it up, it would be black, they'd hit the power button and they're turning it off, not realizing that. And then just navigating a program called Schoology, and that's where all the communication with the teacher is, or my Google Meet won't let me in, or, you know, all of those sort of things. And that tapered off towards the end. But then we're trying to figure out, how do we get library books, like physical books, into the hands of the kids? Do we invest our money, our meager budget, into ebooks and audio books? What if we come back and now we've spent all this money on these ebooks and kids don't really like ebooks? We have discovered middle schoolers don't. And so it really has changed, where we're looking ahead at a future we don't know what it's going to look like, and trying to plan for that. And we have to, you know, have like 2 or 3 or 4 different scenarios. Well, if we come back in January, we have to have this ready. If we don't come back till March or February, then we have to have this ready. Well, what if we don't come back at all? Then we have to start looking at the fall. And so it's been just a very, very interesting. And then going back to the legislature, people are saying, well, what's school like? How are we going to figure this out? How are we going to plan education for the future? And nobody has those answers. I mean, there is no answer to these questions at this time. And so there's a lot of, you know, like different scenarios, and we have no idea how those scenarios might play out because there are so many variables. So it's been such a bizarre, you know, such a bizarre time in life, but we'll get through this, everybody. We will get through it.
We will. There are no answers at this time. I would like that on a bumper sticker and a t-shirt. And
we have no answers. I have no, like, one mom called and she's like, when are we going to come back to school? I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. When are you going to open your schools? I'm like, I just don't have an answer for you, you know?
Right.
I wish I could
That's
help
how
you.
it is.
It's really, it's just such an odd time.
It is indeed an odd time.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Mary.
Yeah.
Let us now turn to a really fun question. What is the very best thing about your job? And also, what is the very not best thing about your job? Carolyn.
So the best thing about my job was all the perks that I used to have. I had so many nice perks, like very fancy client dinners and hotel stays. But now I mean, that's all fluff. Really, I think the biggest perk of my job is just the feeling that I get to be at the table when there are discussions about the future of Minneapolis or St. Paul or, you know, our community. I think that's the coolest perk, to, you know, be able to see buildings that are under construction and to know that I had some role in some of those buildings being developed, whether it was just providing the due diligence to support that development, or the feasibility assessment, or even just like, being on the peripherals of, like working with a broker who got the deal done. I think that's really kind of cool and special. I think I'll always live in a city, and I really think it's fascinating how cities evolve and meet our needs as people, and what the future of cities is, what that will look like, especially in a post-pandemic world. What will cities be like? And so I get to help frame those conversations, and also just speculate about what will occur. What will we do with all this access space that we don't need when we're all working from home, 5 years from now? So I think that's the perk. One downside, I would say maybe it's just some of the emotional volatility. Having difficult colleagues, it's made me a lot tougher and stronger as a person and also as a professional. But when we have deals with such high stakes, like one transaction can net a broker tens of millions of dollars. One transaction can net JLL hundreds of millions of dollars. When we have such high stakes, and oftentimes those stakes are dependent on one decision maker or one small decision, there's a lot of emotions involved. And it's a constant challenge for myself to just kind of be calm, to just remember that I'm here as an information professional. I'm here to give an objective perspective, to give the data, and to frame things in a rational and logical way. But there are definitely some tricky just moments of conflict with colleagues. That's probably the hardest.
Thank you so much. Mary.
Well, I think in both of my positions as a legislator and as an educator, I think the best part of it is the interaction with people. With the kids, we get to see them grow and mature and develop into who they are. I have kids at the middle school that I have known since they were kindergartners. And I've seen their siblings go through the school. And you get to, you feel like you get to help form the kid that they are, or, if that is a needy kid to begin with, that you are able to provide resources that are going to help them and look out for them. And it's the same thing in the legislature, getting to meet all these really neat, diverse people who do incredible work, like Carolyn and Margie. And those are the kind of people that I would be like, I'm both looking at thinking, oh man, I am going to remember her because I'm going to need some information on those issues. And they seem to be my go-to people for that. And I think that I think in both of the roles that I play, it's around educating and building diversity of mind and thinking, both for my students and also for the legislators. There are some pieces of legislature that I've been able to pass that people, legislators didn't know anything about or didn't know that was a problem. And I was able to bring that forward and tell them about them and build a case about why we need to change our laws in order to get the good work done. And it's just the whole process of informing and educating and seeing people take that information and make really good decisions around that. One thing I do want to tell you is that at the legislature, there are legislative libraries at the Capitol, both in the House and in the Senate. And there have been times where I've been like extremely stressed out or just like I am so done with people. I just don't want to see anybody or talk to anybody. And I'll go into the legislative library and they just can look at me and know we don't need to bother her. She knows what she's doing, or we know why she's here. And I can just go find that quiet place. And I'm surrounded by the books and by that environment of learning. And of course, I'm going to miss so much building my collection of books at the school. You know, the ability to buy books, like thousands of dollars in books every year, has just been like the joy of my life. And I don't have that availability. And working with a kid when they come in, they're like, I don't want to read. Reading's dumb. I hate reading. And then you're able to connect them to a book or a series or a genre that you can just sort of see the wheels start to turn. I'm going to miss my students the most. I really will, my students and the books. But you know, when I was at the elementary level and was offered the middle school position, people are like, oh, why would you want to go to middle school? Those kids are awful and blah, blah, blah. And then you know, I get to the legislature and one day I was sitting around listening to some, you know, this nonsensical debate. And I just thought, oh my God, I feel like I'm in middle school. And people were like, why would you want to go to the legislature? They're awful over there. And I'm like, no, the legislature, it was like elementary school kids are, no, middle school kids are just elementary kids in a bigger body. Legislators are just middle school kids in an older body. And so that's how I have been able to kind of deal with all of this as I've changed those different levels.
Thank you so much. And thanks for that shout out to the Legislative Reference Library. Do we have anyone who's attending who works there currently? Sometimes we do. I know that there have been some in the past. So feel free to give me a little hello in the chat if you are and just got your little shout out. And Margie, please tell us best and worst.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, all of a sudden I drew a blank on what the question, oh, the best and the worst. I'm sorry. Yeah, I was like, oh my gosh. Well, a couple things that I absolutely love about what I do. As an independent person, I love the flexibility. As long as I meet my deadlines, you know, I can work when I want. I'm kind of a night owl, so sometimes I'm up pretty late, which means then I have a little bit of, you know, free time to play around with during the day. You know, most of what I do is project-based, and so I can kind of set my own hours and my own days, which I really like. It allows me to, you know, take time off when I want. All I just do is kind of put an gone fishing sign up and, you know, I can be gone. I usually give more warning than that, obviously, but basically, as long as I get my work done, I can kind of set my own schedule, which I appreciate. The other thing I love about my job is just the people I work with. You know, highly intelligent, very, very engaged. And even though so much is electronic these days, I still do a lot of, I'll just pick up the phone because the best way to you know, do that reference interview and to figure out what's what is to actually talk to the person. So I appreciate the people that I work for and with, and my colleagues at Boston Scientific Library are just, you know, they're amazing librarians, extremely smart. I learn a lot from them, and so I really enjoy working with them as well as the clients that I have. So probably the least thing that, you know, as an independent person, anyone in my position would say, any kind of consultant is, you know, you often don't know when the work is going to come. You can't always, budget for your an annual, how much you're going to make in a year, your annual salary. When you don't work, you don't get paid. So, planning for tax season can be kind of tricky. So there's that, but certainly the benefits outweigh the negatives. So yeah.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, so I presume that when you all took these jobs that you have, that you had some idea what you were signing on for. So tell me something that surprised you once you'd been doing your job for a while, something that was unexpected about this job. Mary.
I think as a library media specialist, I think what surprised me was the fact that people, even in your principal or administrators in your district, don't really realize the value of a licensed library media specialist in their school as a collaborative participant. When I was at the elementary school, I did a lot of other things, like I said, I was the testing coordinator, I did the yearbook, I, did a fundraiser for our rain garden. I mean, I did these things in addition to the work as a library media specialist, and I didn't get paid for any of those things. And when I left to go to middle school, all those things that they just sort of took for granted, all of a sudden they're like, well, who's going to do that? Or who does that? And they're like, well, Mary does that. And they ended up, I think realizing just how much we do that work. So when it comes to the library media specialist position, I think we are really underrated and underappreciated. And the level of collaboration throughout the school building and through the school district, because we work with each other in the build, as library media specialists in the schools, we have our own professional group that we collaborate with. And I feel, I always am so disheartened by that lack of appreciation or recognition for all of the hard work that we do in and out. We have to keep up on our technology skills, and people just expect us to be able to do that, Oh, we're going to hand over the website to you. Well, now you have to be sure you know how to, manage a website or do the social media in an appropriate way. I think that's probably the saddest thing. And then at the legislature, I've been trying to really focus on the value of libraries and library media specialists. And I know for years that was just sort of, in the education committees, there was not much discussion around it, or nobody talked about how we can support libraries and library media specialists. There was some of it, but you really have to have somebody who experienced that to be able to tell the tales. And the last couple of sessions, we've been able to have hearings all around librarians and library media specialists, kind of like what we're doing here. And it's opened up people's eyes to that, the legislators' eyes to that. So when it comes to funding, just like with our schools, I would like to find ways to create permanent, progressive funding for our libraries, all the different kind of libraries throughout our state. Public libraries, perhaps even find ways to support private libraries or these unique ones that we have been hearing about. But people just don't really see the value of it until it's gone. Now that our libraries have been closed because of COVID, I have one woman in my district. She calls me, especially when we're in the thick of the COVID, she would call me at least once a week and say, did you talk to the governor? Did you tell him to open the libraries? Because she doesn't have a computer. She lives all by herself. And so the library was the one way that she could get information. She could go to the library, use their computers, interact with people. She had kind of this little group of folks that she had, that was her social group. and she was totally cut off from that. She had no idea, you know, a lot of the things that were happening. And every week she would call me and say, did you talk to the governor and tell him to open up those libraries again? And so, you know, I'm hoping that as we go post-COVID and we are looking to how we are funding our communities, and again, providing the resources that support our families, that we are taking a stronger look at libraries and putting, you know, really investing in them for the future.
Oh boy, do I hope so too. Wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
All right.
We do hope so, Mary. You know, we like to come see you when we have Library Legislative Day, although that's going to be all virtual this year too, of course. I
Mhm.
do know, this morning they were talking at the Legislative Committee meeting that MDE is working on a definition of what a media specialist is and does, and for the whole media programs to include a media specialist in their definition. So I think that's a positive step in the right direction.
Yeah, I think it
So,
really is. And you have to have people, and I know we have lobbyists, and you are there, and as well as many other folks throughout the year. It's not just that one day on the Hill,
right.
but you have to have somebody that's going to pick it up and carry it through the legislature. And we've had a few, like Mary Murphy, who has been our champion, and Leon Lilly is a champion. And people will say, yeah, I really believe in libraries and they're really valuable. But then when it comes right down to it, you know, they're just not on the, you know, they've been cut out of the budget. And, you know, I look forward to the day where I'm a chair of one of those seats, and I'm just gonna like,
Definitely.
man, just wait.
In spite of everything, I will say that the Minnesota legislature over the years, while we haven't gotten any increases in our funding, the multi-type funding or regional library basic system support funding, we haven't been cut either.
Yeah, that's really important as well.
So just, we don't like to bash our legislators.
No.
But all three of my legislators in District 57 are very supportive of libraries. But
excellent.
Anyway, this is off the topic, but we're relying on you, Mary.
We are. And Margie, and I'm just going to repeat the question for the attendees. I know we went a little off topic there. So we're talking about, you had some idea of what you signed up for when you started your job. Tell us something that surprised you once you got there.
Oh, I think what really surprised me was that I got most of my work and my clients through word of mouth. And I don't think I was expecting it. I really spent a lot of time doing my due diligence. I spent hours over at the James J. Hill Library, you know, trying to put together a broad list of you know, executives in the medical device field in the Twin Cities in the Minnesota area, and you know, doing some cold calling and writing letters and, you know, sending out resumes that were kind of tailored to that company. And I really thought that was the way to go. And it went completely flat. And randomly, a startup, it was a little company in Plymouth, had posted on Craigslist, of all places, that they were looking for a medical librarian, which sounds so crazy to think that was there. And when I followed up with it and eventually got the contract, it turned out that the person who was responsible for throwing this crazy ad out on Craigslist was from, you know, Boston Scientific and Medtronic, and so he knew what a medical librarian was, and he knew exactly what he was looking for. I just thought it was kind of a funny way to go about it, considering, well, you know, it wasn't the normal library job channels that I was used to. But what happened then was he would share my name, and it would get shared and shared and shared. So I never had to do any hunting for clients. They all just kept finding me, and that truly surprised me, and it's actually been a great blessing. So I'm not complaining about that surprise at all. So
Wonderful. Thank you. And since you did mention it, it popped into my head. It wasn't on the title card, but we are doing a panel on featuring medical librarians on February 10th of next year. So that one is scheduled. I don't have all of the panelists booked as of yet, but be looking out for that one if you have an interest in medical librarians. Thank you, Margie.
thanks.
Carolyn.
The thing that surprised me the most and still continues to surprise me is how opaque commercial real estate is, like just the information. And this flies in the face of what we learned in library school, where it's, you know, there's a database for everything. You can always find the information. And actually, that's really not the case. And it's also, nobody should be surprised that the Trump family finances are so opaque and so mysterious. It's because it's all in commercial real estate. And like, I think as many of us know, you can acquire a property as any LLC. But in our world where it's, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars in deals, or sometimes even billions of dollars in transactions in some of the larger markets, you have equity partners and you have debt partners. And so the people or the entities that actually like own the physical real estate are, I have colleagues that like do deals and they don't even know like all the different equity partners. So that's a challenge. It's my job to provide information, and the people that are doing the deals don't even have all the information. It's a challenge. And so when I started at JLL 5 years ago, a big initiative that I undertook was to start to encourage my colleagues to share information with each other. As brokers, as I mentioned, most brokers are 100% commission. So even within the JLL umbrella, most of my colleagues are competing against each other. So they are withholding information from other brokers because they don't want to lose an advantage. They don't want to lose a client. Everything is so secret until the deal is finally done. And then even after the deal is done, that's still top secret information because those comps, the comparables, are highly valuable. So I am always trying to weasel my way into conversations. And I say weasel, like really it's building trust. And so if a commercial real estate broker is brokering deals, in some ways I'm brokering information, and I literally will trade information with one colleague for another colleague. So OMs, offering memorandums, those are like the books on a building. So if you're going to sell a building, you create an offering memorandum. I've literally traded one OM for another OM to kind of share information and pool information. And I'm just constantly an advocate for, you know, if you think this information would be valuable to other people, they probably have information that's valuable to you too. So like, what can we share? What do you feel comfortable sharing? And that's also where research can step in. So a lot of times the individual parcels of info are private, but if I aggregate it all, if I sum it all up or create a macro view of what the trends are, that's a lot easier to digest than just like sharing one trade. So if I can aggregate the data and then summarize into themes, that's where I can make a difference. But it's just a constant challenge, just how secret so much of this stuff is.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Okay. So the final question I'm going to hit you with tonight is, what did you not learn in library school that you wish you did? All right. And I'm going to start with Margie on this one.
Gosh, that was a really long time ago. Library school, for me, I should say. It was so long ago when I was in library school. the word internet was just being used for the first time. And like people were trying to get their heads around it. It was really fascinating. So that dates me right there. I suppose, so I don't remember that we had anything to do with like searching in the way that I do my literature searches. But I know, it seemed like our classes were on indexing and, some of the nuts and bolts of public librarianship and history and that sort of thing. So, I don't know what I would have loved to have learned in library school. I wish I'd learned, I guess. I can't, it's just so, I have no idea what they're teaching now and if it would benefit me now, but it's a little bit self-taught along the way of what I need, for me to do my job. So.
Well, I still found it very interesting. So thank you very much.
Yeah, sure.
And Carolyn.
If there's anybody listening that has some amount of control or input into MLIS programs in the curriculum, I feel like government resources, government data is something that really, at least I didn't experience much education around that when I was in graduate school. But I think it's the lowest hanging fruit because there are so many free resources. I use the Census Bureau every day. I use the BLS every day. There's so many like weird, nerdy niche products that the Census Bureau offers that not many people know how to use or use well. I'm doing a consulting project right now, and I'm using some JLL resources, some databases that we have, but I really feel like I could totally, like, completely only use free government data sources and do this consulting project and, make whatever the consulting fee is. There's so much data that the US government offers that people just don't know how to get at. And librarians are perfect for the perfect solution to find that data and then know how to use it well and what the value could be.
That's a great answer. And I don't know if we have any library school muckety mucks in attendance tonight. However, Anne knows everybody. But that actually, the idea of free government resources that are, available widely to everyone, I feel like someone has asked for that or some version of that of Metronet in the past. So maybe we, Anne, should do a wind down on free government resources. And I might reach out to Carolyn and make her have me a list of like her favorites or something like that.
Well, and our friends who are the government documents librarians at the University of Minnesota, we've been to see them in both and also at Hennepin County at the Central Library. I will say I went to library school long before many of you have been alive, and there was no internet, there were no databases commercially available. OCLC was a glimmer in Ohio. I went to school in Ohio Library's eyes. But one thing we did learn and learned well, and I have used these many years, is exactly what Carolyn is describing, the government resources, and learned how to use the census and learned how to use the resources at the census. I worked at the US Department of Housing and Urban Development in Washington, DC. There's a huge, huge cache of data at HUD. And so, I think in modern library school, with the advent of databases and online searching and the internet, there's the assumption that you can find what you need using those resources. I was at an MLA program when the government shut down, and those librarians were talking about, oh, the census, we didn't have access to the census. What do you mean you didn't have access to the census? They were still printing it at that time. And it was available in the university libraries and the other depository libraries. This is just a rant, so I'll stop. But we did learn about those resources. Caroline is describing. And I do think it's valuable because the other thing it should, one, the statistical abstract is the index to a lot of those resources and to resources that are produced by other organizations beyond the government. But we did know how to use them, and we knew they existed because it was the only way to know it. So,
I will say, I did learn government resources when I was in library school, but I went to library school in Washington, D.C. They were big on government everything out there. And I know certainly there must be at least one or two St. Kate students who are in the chat and would like to let us know, do they teach government resources at St. Kate's in the library school? So hit me in the chat and let us know. Meanwhile, Mary, if you would please tell us what you didn't learn in library school that you wish you had.
Starting my teaching career when computers were coming into schools. And a lot of that was just, word processing and learning to type and that sort of thing. So I could have used a lot more of that in the background. But I guess, again, seeing that I have now like bridged education and legislation, I would hope that as education programs are going forward, that they would have more classes or more discussion around advocacy for students, and learn how to be a lobbyist, learn how to talk to your legislators, realize that your state representatives are the ones that finance schools. And I didn't realize that. I really didn't get that understanding coming out of college. And also the role that unions play in education. I think that it's really important to understand that and how that kind of advocacy is important for not just our teachers, but for our students as well. And so I think our world as teachers in our little classrooms has really expanded globally, and understanding the necessity for, as we create a more and more global community with folks coming from all over. Maybe now that we have a different administration in Washington, D.C., we will see the increase of immigrants again. I was not at all really prepared for ESL or EL kids. I mean, I had students that were coming out of refugee camps over in Cambodia. Literally one day they got on a plane, and 2 days later, 3 days later, they were in my classroom. And I'm like, what do I do with these kids? They don't speak English, And so I think that we really do need to prepare our teachers even more. They're really good at it, but I think that also needs to be part of the conversation. So how to lobby for ourselves and how to build a global educational program.
I agree with that. I definitely didn't learn about lobbying. I know St. Kate's does touch on it a bit. I know Anne has personally spoken at St. Kate's about coming and lobbying for libraries, and we've had some students involved, but I think there's definitely some room for improvement there.
Well, I think that, if you are a teacher and you have good ideas about how we should be funding or regulating education, there's a bill in there somewhere. And I don't think anybody really knows that you as, an individual in our society can go to your legislator and say, I want you to do a bill around this. And chances are they will do that if you convince them of it. So many of the bills that I have carried have come from individuals with a problem and have an idea or a solution. And voila, it's like, yeah, that sounds great. Let's do that. And we can get it done if we know it. So I think that's really important for folks to understand.
I think it is too, which makes me think that'd be another great wind down in the future. Have Mary come back and demystify the process for us all a little bit.
It's not nearly intimidating as you think.
I think that's one of the key things about lobbying and advocacy is it's not as intimidating as people think. And it can be as simple as an email or a letter in the olden days when they accepted letters, email or a phone call or whatever. And, you know, you usually get an answer. It may not be the answer you want, and it depends on, you know, I mean, I would write back in the day to representative client. It didn't matter what the topic was, I got the same answer. You know, it's like, okay, thanks. Please don't just send me the same, whatever. But I do think it's practice as much as anything. That's how we ended up being friends with Mary, you know, going to the legislature and saying, hey, we're librarians too. So it's kind of, you know, so it can happen. And I do think the other thing that gets overlooked in advocacy among librarians of all types, and it seems to me in my career, especially Minnesota librarians, they are reluctant to respond to calls for action, you know, and it doesn't matter where you're a librarian. If we're calling you to action to support the Institute of Museum and Library Services in Washington, do it, you know, or if we want you to reach out to whomever in St. Paul, please do it. It, you know, oh, well, I'm nobody, they don't care. Everybody, it votes, they care if you vote. So I do think that that's important. I think the other thing about government and paying attention to government in library school and as librarians is it's government who funds so much of this data collection and publication that we rely on. And certainly in the last several administrations prior, this current one, but also prior they cutting those agencies. You know, when they closed all the EPA libraries and threw out all the stuff, it was like, oh my gosh, why would you do that? Anyway, I do think we need to pay attention to that kind of stuff too, as part of our lobbying.
I agree. Well, we are now down to 3 minutes remaining in our wonderful session. I'm going to pop that title card back up on your screens just so you can see those dates one more time, and also the link to that evaluation, which once again, I will remind you, I will send out via email to all attendees today. So you will get that. Although if you like to get a jump start, feel free. And I want to take a moment to thank all of our wonderful panelists. You guys did a fantastic job. I really enjoyed talking to all of you and hearing your stories and your incredibly unique perspective on the library community. It was fabulous. If you have further questions from the chat or Q&A, you can always reach out to me and I can get you in touch with or reach out to one of our panelists at any time. Is there anything else anyone would like to say? We've got about 2 minutes left to go. I know we didn't hit all the questions, so if there was something burning that you wanted to share it and I didn't give you the opportunity, now is the time. Okay. I'm not seeing anyone has the burning desire to share. I'm getting thank yous from the comments. So I will say we're going to call it at 5:58. Thank you all for attending. And we will see you in January. Please come back and watch us in January when we start off with state level library services in Minnesota.
Thank you so much. This was an honor. Thank you for hosting. It was nice to meet everybody.
Nice to meet you too.
Thank you.
It really was fascinating. I love these panels just because people are so different and have different approaches to things. It's great. And Carolyn, your job, wow. Complicated in a way that that you don't expect when you're in library school, maybe.
Yeah, I'm always happy. I'm a big advocate for informational interviews or just, you know, connecting with new people. So please reach out if anybody has questions. I think my email is probably someplace. Or,
Olivia has it.
I have it. So if somebody needs it, we can get it to them.
Yeah. Thank you, though. It was nice to meet everybody.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
And come visit us at the Capitol once it's open again.
We'll be there.
All right.
Enjoy your final Zoom meeting of the day, Mary.
Bye, you guys.
Bye.
Bye.